Hey everyone. So in the last episode, we set up our chart of accounts, which I have already got a template for. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the general ledger and start setting up things such as the financial dimensions and the account structure. So really, before we set this up, you really need to understand, this is really critical that you understand the key aspects of the business you're setting up for before you can do this effectively. So if we want to look at this example that I'm utilizing, we've got three companies. So we've got Kudu over here. We've then got JMT Properties. And we've got Murdoch. Okay. So Kudu over here is the head office, if you will. So Kudu owns a percentage of both those companies. What Kudu does is it's consulting, but it also does shared services. So what those shared services are, they consist of financial services, operations, sales, marketing, human resources, and payroll. So what Kudu does is it actually provides these shared services over here to JMT Properties for a fee. It also provides those shared services to Murdoch for a fee. Then what happens is Murdoch has a bunch of franchises all across Australia. So in Victoria, in QLD, in New South Wales, Western Australia, Northern Territory, and Tasmania. Okay. So what Murdoch does is it provides photography services throughout Australia. What JMT does is it manages properties throughout Australia. Again, the same element. It has states: Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales, Tasmania, Northern Territory, and I've forgotten ACT. Some people are going to be upset. There we go. Okay, so what this means then is if we look at when we want to do our reporting on these companies from an overarching perspective, we want to know how much money we are earning and spending within each one of those states. So that would be financial dimension number one. Okay? FinDem 1 equals state. Okay? Then what we also wanted to know is we want to know from Kudu how much money is Kudu making from the shared services it provides to JMT Properties and Murdoch. This way we can kind of keep those costs in line. We can make sure that they're efficient. We can then also report that if there's an equity share related to those shared services, or we can then also discuss service level agreements, all sorts of elements. So financial dimension 2 would be department. Ultimately, those shared services consist of, like I said, finance, sales, marketing, HR, payroll, and IT services. So that's a department. So those departments will then provide those services to the other companies and then make money for the management and the running of those companies. So how do we set this up in practice? So we've got two financial dimensions. First one's estate, second one's department. So if we go into an AX, we can set up departments, and then what we'll do is set up states and then link it to an account structure. So let's do that. So we'll go into AX, we'll go to general ledger, we'll go into setup, we'll then scroll all the way down to organization and departments. We now have to create these departments. So we're going to create, I just want to confirm, I'm in JMT. Let's switch to Kudu. So we'll go down and we'll go to departments. So ultimately these departments exist within Kudu. So we'll go new and we'll call this finance. Okay. We'll then create another one. This would be sales. We'll create marketing, human resources, payroll, and RT. Okay. So there's an operations department, which will also create, well, we don't need to worry about it too much because Murdoch and JMT Properties will look after their own operations, and Kudu operations would consist of their consulting revenue. So there's our departments created. Now what we can do is we can actually create the financial dimensions that relate to departments and state. So if we go in here, again, general ledger setup, and we go into financial dimensions, we'll go new, and we can use values from existing entities within the system. So since departments already been set up, we can then just choose departments. Okay, we can then call it report column name, and if we look at the values, all those values already exist, so we don't have to create those again. However, with state, it doesn't exist as an item in here, so we're going to have to choose custom dimension and call it state. You can call the state, yeah, and then we're going to have to set up our own values. So we'll set it up and we'll say Victoria, we'll say Queensland, and we'll say New South Wales, we'll also say Tasmania, WA, Western Australia, Australia, and we'll put in Southern Australia or South Australia. Okay, if I missed Northern Territory, cool, and then we'll put ACT here, ACT, cool. Okay. So now we've got two financial dimensions. So what financial dimensions do is they allow you to then, to really, when you say you've incurred some expense or income or asset or anything, such as our chart of accounts over here, it'll then tell you where that occurred. So let's say, for example, Kudu earned some consulting revenue. I'll then put it in. I wouldn't need to put in a department, or I could put in the department of consulting, and I could put in the state that we made that revenue. So let's say I made $1,000 for Kudu. We'd put it in main account 101,000,000. We'd then say it's for the department consulting, and then in the state of Victoria. And this way, if we wanted to group the total of our revenue by state, we can do that. So at the end of the fiscal year or the end of the month, and we want to know how much revenue Victoria made, we can do that. If we wanted to know how much money Queensland made, we can do that. If we wanted to know how much Google AdWords we spent within the marketing department for Northern Territory, we can do that. So it's a really good way of categorizing and segmenting your financial data. So, however, you need to set it up so that the account structure complies with this. So let's do that now. We'll go back into AX. Okay. And we'll go again, general ledger, setup, and we'll go within here, chart of accounts, configure account structures. Okay. And we'll create a new account structure. So again, I'm going to call it standard. So all of these will be standard, and as the business grows, we may become more complex and use different elements. So let's just call this a standard one, and we're going to add the main account. So this is very small. What that says though is all values, and we can add a segment. We're going to say state, Okay, all values. If you actually go in here, you can say allow blanks if it's not a mandatory dimension. So we always want to know what state it is, but we don't want to make it mandatory just yet. We mainly operate in Victoria, so when we get bigger, we'll make that mandatory. But for now, we'll allow people to put it in blank, and same thing with department. So let's do that. We'll say allow blanks. Actually, let's not do that. Problem is then people will just put blanks. So what we're going to say here is every main account you enter has to have a state and a department put against it. We can now validate and we can activate. This now means our account structure is active, and it means any time a financial transaction occurs, the state as well as the department will have to be filled out. So that's it for configuring account structures and financial dimensions from a very basic business use case. As the business grows, you may become more complex, but as a basic structure, this should serve you just fine. That's all for now. Speak soon. Ciao.